Good afternoon, everybody. As always, my name is JC, and welcome to my channel, Everyman's Thoughts. I'm pretty excited today as we break down the full Rings of Power trailer released at San Diego Comic-Con. Obvious spoiler warning, so consider yourself warned, and let's get started.
We thought the war, at last, was ended.
As the trailer opens, we hear the phrase, "We thought the war at last was ended." At the same time, we're treated to a stunning scene where a clearly emotional Galadriel is adding a helmet to an already mountainous pile. The obvious presumption here is that each helmet represents a dead elf, and Galadriel being emotional means that this particular helmet belonged to someone close to her. Because of the substantial deviations from the lore, it is hard to know which battle this is and who Galadriel is mourning for. If I had to guess, I'd have to say this was the War of Wrath, which Galadriel absolutely was not at, and the dead loved one will be Finrod, who absolutely died someplace else. That being said, the picture itself is quite impressive. It's impactful and beautiful without a trace of any obvious bad CGI. I also don't think it's just coincidence or happenstance that we have this light play of the dark on the right and the light and Galadriel on the left. It'd be interesting to see if this camera were to pan out what is off to the right beyond this pile of helmets. Definitely one of the better things Amazon has released so far.
Today, our days of peace begin.
Next, we hear Gil-galad say, "Today our days of peace begin." We see the elven city of Lindon and then a small ceremony where a group of elves, including Galadriel, are receiving some form of honors. The elves wearing armor would imply this is a military ceremony. Combine that with the sentiment of the first two narrations and you may be led to believe that these two scenes are related. I don't think this is true though. In fact, having two different narrators would suggest otherwise. We know from the books that Galadriel absolutely did not participate in the War of Wrath, and we have no images from the show that would suggest otherwise. We have seen footage, though, of Galadriel leading the Numenorian cavalry for some reason, so perhaps this ceremony is related to the fake capture and surrender of Sauron. Again, the cinematography is quite good and looks to be something that is worth my time.
We thought our joys would be unending. We thought our light would never dim.
We thought our joys would be unending. We thought our light would never dim. Yet another sentence speaking of peace, hope, optimism for the future. It's pretty obvious that they're telling us this is the mindset of the world as the show begins. If you recall way back when they first released the written synopsis for the show, the very first sentence was, "We begin in a time of relative peace." The sequence of images begin with the dinner party that we've seen before. I've already spoken quite a bit about this, but there is one thing I want to add. It occurs to me that Durin's wife, Disa, isn't there, and that should give all of us a lot of hope. I'm certainly not trying to denigrate that character in any way, it's just that in the books, dwarves were secretive and protective of their women towards strangers, and the idea of her making this trip to Lindon would be unthinkable. We know that Amazon likes to promote female characters, unfortunately sometimes even at the cost of a more coherent story, but perhaps the fact that Disa isn't here shows that they do intend to respect that aspect of dwarven culture. Next, we have some children playing, really nothing more spot on about hope and joy in the future than children playing, and then a strange symbol on some form of textile. The sand would indicate they're at the beach, which would likely mean this textile is in fact a canvas sail, and these men are sailors. Way to go, Captain Obvious. Since they're humans and sailors, I'm going to go with Numenorians, but the symbol still eludes me. It would have to be some kind of smaller subgroup like the Faithful or maybe even Isildur's family. Finally, we get the birds that we've seen previously flying from the light towards the ship. I have no idea what this is, and I don't particularly like the visuals as well. The light may be because this is in the time of the trees, which may then mean this is a flashback, which would hopefully explain the overly glossy look of this picture.
The skies are strange.
It is here, Galadriel. The moment we feared.
Now this is where things start to get interesting. To this point, we've seen themes of peace and hope for the future. Then we see the meteor and immediately transition into war, destruction, pain. As the pivot point is the meteor, there is a clear suggestion that it is key to the transition from good to bad, and by extension, the man inside is likely evil. This is, of course, adding fuel to the fire for those who are speculating that Meteor Man is actually Sauron. Now let's look at the individual scenes. We have Sadoc Burrows saying the skies are strange. We've seen this before. Then we move through another beautiful shot of Numenor with Tarmiriel and Galadriel standing by a seeing stone. For me, this is one of the more troubling scenes, not just for the trailer, but for the series as a whole. Tarmiriel tells Galadriel it's here, the moment that we have feared has finally come, suggesting that they've been in communication and planning with each other for an extended period of time. Tarmiriel was never queen. Galadriel never went to Numenor. Disregarding these two facts is bad enough, but having these two in a long-term collaboration where they're smarter than everybody else just to meet Amazon's quota of strong female leads is disrespect on a whole new level. What I think some people are missing here is that when you make changes this significant, you're committing yourself to making further changes in a ripple effect down the line that keep adding up. Eventually, you reach a point where the story you're telling looks nothing like the original.
Evil does not sleep. It waits.
As we move on, the transition from optimism to fear deepens, the music becomes more ominous, and we hear the phrase, "Evil does not sleep, it waits." In the first scene, we see Tarmiriel taking notice of the falling flower petals, or tree leaves. When we saw this scene in isolation, I first thought this was the people showering Pharazon with flower petals, and Tarmiriel taking notice of just how much power he had with the people. I've since abandoned my hope that we're ever actually going to see our Pharazon as a king or anything more than a minor side character, and in the extended version of this scene we can see it's actually the leaves falling off the white tree. Historically speaking, leaves falling off the tree would be an ill omen, which absolutely fits with where we're at in the trailer. Next we see three mysterious figures on top of a hillside. I don't see any clues pointing to what this might be, so if I were to speculate, I would guess this may be the beginnings of the cult of Morgoth on Numenor. Then, as the narrator says evil waits, we are introduced to a new and ominous-looking character. There were people at Comic-Con that said they had confirmation that this was Sauron. However, I've yet to be able to discover the basis for why they are making that claim, and it was all happening in real time on Twitter, so it was rather hard to follow. From what I could tell, the claim of confirmation was later retracted regardless, so stay tuned.
Beyond the darkness, tempting shadow, to bury us all beneath the mountain.
Next, we have Elrond visiting the dwarves, likely seeking a military alliance, and more narration along the themes of darkness and shadow. But the scene stealer here is these absolutely stunning views of Khazad-dûm. I'm not sold on the story Amazon's about to tell us. In fact, I'm deeply concerned that we know so little. But from what I've seen so far, I don't think there's any question this is going to be one of the most visually impressive shows we've ever seen. In this scene, we see Galadriel waking up covered in ash amidst a battle that looks to have already been lost. As Galadriel is not a warrior in the books, it's very difficult to know what this scene might be, but we can speculate. Considering how much ash is present and the fact it would take something pretty powerful to get the better of or incapacitate Galadriel, you could make a guess that maybe this was a dragon attack, but as I said, that is pure speculation. Regardless, once again, this scene looks absolutely beautiful, and I can't wait to see it.
He has not one name, but many.
The narrator says he has not one name, but many, a likely reference to Sauron. We first see a foreboding fortress in what looks to be the frozen wastes, and then the symbol of the Eye of Sauron forming in the ice. Because of the time compression, it's difficult to say what this is, but based on its location, I'm guessing this is an old fortress left over from the War of Wrath, and the symbol in the ice is letting you know it now belongs to Sauron.
Have you heard of him, lad? Have you heard of Sauron?
As we move along, we see an old man grabbing Theo and asking him if he knows Sauron. At first, this scene confused me, but if you look closer, the devil's in the details. First, when the old man grabs Theo's arm, he twists it, presumably to call attention to the mark that Theo has on his forearm. Second, we see the stranger has his own sleeve rolled up. Again, we can assume that he has the same mark. This is somehow how he knows about Sauron and why it is he's interacting with Theo. Looking at the scene as a whole, I'm wondering if this is just a coincidence or maybe this is a refugee camp and everybody has the mark, just don't know. We then see Bronwyn hiding in a closet from a particularly nasty looking creature. I'm so happy that they've decided to go with practical effects as some of these orcs look amazing. Based on what we've seen from this and previous trailers, I think we can safely conclude that the village of Tir Harad gets overrun. This is our first extended scene with Theo and the Morgul blade. Does the blade work because he has the mark, or does he have the mark because he found the blade, or none of the above?
If the evil rising is left unchecked, it will take us all.
This clip provides a lot of clarity to what we've seen previously. For what we know now, it appears there are going to be several trips across the frozen wastes, and this clip would seem to confirm that at least one of those trips is going to be them heading to that frozen fortress that we saw earlier. With the boat explosion, we don't have a lot to go on. However, the character in the foreground does look like Isildur. Perhaps this is the King's men attacking the boats of the faithful, preventing them from leaving or sending a message. It's definitely human and almost certainly Numenorian.
Find the light and the shadow.
We see Bronwyn telling Theo, "Find the light and the shadow will not find you." You have to wonder if Theo is being corrupted by the blade or the mark, or maybe this is just a mother trying to console a scared child.
I will not find you.
Now that we know Theo has the mark of Sauron, I have to admit I am a little more intrigued about that storyline than I was before. As Bronwyn says the shadow will not find you, we see a figure in all black walking through an assembly of orcs. The symbolism there is obvious. However, did you notice the orcs were nodding and sort of stepping back in respect? That was a fun detail I really liked, added an era of gravitas to the moment. As far as the figure in black himself, I'm almost certain that was Adar, who is most likely going to be the primary big bad for Season 1. It's interesting that while we're talking about the shadow, we see the clip of Halbrand. There are some prominent people on YouTube who have suggested that Halbrand is Sauron, and if I had to bet, right now that would be my guess too.
Survive this!
Since we know Tir Harad is going to be attacked, this is obviously Bronwyn trying to inspire the villagers to fight. We've seen this scene before, and the more I see it, the more I am convinced that this is the Oath of Feynor and will almost certainly be included in the first 10 minutes of the first episode, where they're going to have a heavy prologue. It also fits with what Amazon did with Wheel of Time, where everything bad that happens is because of men, and they're happy to tell you about it in the first few minutes of the first episode.
Fight with me.
Next we have Galadriel boarding a Numenorian ship and then embracing arms with somebody on the ship. Now, I don't know who Galadriel is meeting in this scene. It could be anybody from Pharazon all the way down to Halbrand, so I don't really have much of an opinion. However, the obvious green screen in the background when Galadriel is boarding the ship is one of the few mistakes they've made in terms of visuals so far. This scene may be one of the most pivotal in the series, and I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it. We see Tarmeria wearing formal, glamorous attire as flower petals are showered around her. This can only be one of two things as far as I can tell. This is either her wedding ceremony to Pharazon, or the victory ceremony with the fake capture of Sauron. To this point, with everything we've seen, including this trailer, Amazon has signaled that Tarmirian and Galadriel are going to be over the top Thelma and Louise. However, if this is a wedding scene, it may send a strong signal that they are going to respect the lore, they are going to treat the character of our Pharazon the way he deserves, and the relationship between Tarmiriel and Galadriel may be a little more muted than what we previously thought. On the other hand, if this is a battle victory ceremony and Tarmiriel and Galadriel were at the head of the armies, which this trailer did strongly imply, then the whole situation could be even worse than what we were already expecting. That's why I'm saying that when this is all said and done, this may be one of the most important scenes in the entire series. As we move along, we see some quickly cut scenes of Disa singing, Durin the Fourth holding some mithril, and a close scene between Arondir and Bronwyn. Here we have Galadriel at the head of some Numenor cavalry, and as cool as this shot is, I just keep going back to asking myself, what battle is she going to participate in, and how is that going to change the true history of the story? Until we know how severe those consequences might be, it's difficult to enjoy these shots for what they are. Orcs running through the forest, really happy with how the orcs are looking at this point. This looks to be an extension of the Galadriel shipwreck scene. If I recall, the books did have sea serpents, and this scene looks great. I hope in the show it actually pays off. Next we hear the duration, there can be no trust between hammer and rock. Then we see Durin leading a contingent of dwarves. His words are profound, but you have to wonder, is he talking about elves and dwarves, or is hammer and rock good and evil? Another great looking orc. I'm really looking forward to his battle with Arendil. Okay guys, this video has gotten stupid long, so there's two more scenes I want to hit on before we wrap this up.
You have been told many lies of Middle-earth.
First, we have Casper here blowing on a leaf which floats away and then transitions into catching fire. For this and other obvious reasons, people began immediately speculating that this was Sauron. I honestly don't know if he is or isn't. At the time of this recording, there was no confirmation one way or the other. And finally, we have this big, beautiful Balrog, which may be the best cut of the trailer. Even the casual observer will notice the similarities between this and the Balrog from the Peter Jackson films, and I think that was a good idea. The cynic in me ponders the idea that the thing I liked most about this trailer was something they took from somebody else. Well guys, that's it for me this time. Please consider hitting that like or subscribe button, and I will see you next time.